Hello, welcome everyone. I am Stephanie Fine-Sassy. I'm the founder of The Plenary Co. And if you're not familiar, The Plenary Co. is an arts and education nonprofit, and we focus on creating new ways for the public to engage with social, scientific, and environmental issues. So one of our big projects this year has been the I Am a Scientist program. And that program is focused on breaking STEM barriers and stereotypes across classrooms and communities. And we do that through telling scientists stories, by demystifying their career paths, and by giving students access to resources and supporting stories and ideas and ways for them to get involved with STEM that really aligns with their purpose and the things that they care the most about. We actually are going to be launching our new poster kits in the coming weeks. So if you haven't checked them out already, please do head on over to iamascientist.info to learn more and to sign up, because you have until December 2nd to do that. So then one of the things that has spun out of that program is the RISE community. So the RISE community stands for Resources for Inclusive STEM Education, and it is a community for educators across the country, anybody who would like to join and be part of conversations about how to make STEM more inclusive. And that's what this program is part of. So this program is a series of conversations with experts, with leaders, with people who are innovating and trying to make a difference specifically in inclusive STEM education. And in this case today, STEAM education. So we are going to be speaking to two incredible innovators in the STEAM education space. The first is Danielle Boyer. She is a member of the Ojibwe tribe, and she's a young entrepreneur. She's an author, she's an educator and an inventor from Troy, Michigan. She is also the founder of the STEAM Connection, which we will talk about a little bit later. She's worked in STEAM education since she was 10 years old, and now she works to increase STEAM educational accessibility, affordability, and diversity for children. She was recently named one of People's Girls Changing the World, a L'Oreal Paris Woman of Worth, and she was recently featured on an NBC special. We will also be talking to Shawn, who's a member of the Navajo tribe and is currently a senior in electrical engineering and a board member at the STEAM Connection. He's worked on research projects ranging from tools for NASA to artificial muscles, and now he's working to expand STEAM-based Indigenous groups on his college campus through organizations like AISES, which is the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. So we are so excited to welcome Danielle and Shawn to the conversation. I'm gonna bring them in. Hello, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. So why don't we just jump right in and get started with a little bit more about who you are. I would love to hear from each of you a little bit about your story, your journey through STEM, or in this case, STEAM, and a little bit about how you got to where you are today. Danielle, do you want to go first?
Of course. So I've been in STEAM, which stands for Science, Tech, Engineering, Art, and Math, for a super long time now. Over 20 years, or 10 years, I'm 20. And it's been really interesting as a journey, because when I was younger, I saw that my little sister was interested in STEAM subjects, but we were homeschooled and there weren't a lot of resources to be able to learn about that. I was like, there's gotta be something that we can do. And one day I was at the store and I saw animal puppets, and I was like, what if I taught an animal science class? And my mom was like, dude, you're 10 years old. Like, there's no way that you can teach a class. It was like, no way. And I was like, but what if? And I ended up making these super crazy looking coloring sheets and activity sheets for the kids. And it was a semester long kindergarten class. And since then, it kind of opened my eyes to how education can solve problems in our communities, and how issues on STEAM, specifically educational accessibility, is a really pervasive problem in many areas, and I wanted to do something to solve it. Fast forward many years, I ended up joining a FIRST robotics team, which stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. And that was honestly a very difficult journey. I didn't fit in. It was very much a boys' club. And I kept on pushing onward, joining a new robotics team, and ultimately it just wasn't the best of fit. So I decided to start my own nonprofit in January of 2019, named the STEAM Connection. As you can see my logo right here.
That's perfect. And can you tell me a little bit about the A in STEAM? So we usually use the word STEM, but we are huge fans of STEAM, of STREAM. We use STEM just for shorthand. Talk to us a little bit about the role of A in STEAM for you.
So the A stands for art. And I was thinking about when I was starting the STEAM Connection, what skills are really important to teach kids to help them pursue their best futures. And I believe everything from digital design to coding to electrical engineering to graphic design are all really important tech-based skills that are just key for a child to be able to learn to their best potential. And that's how the STEAM Connection and my love for STEAM was born.
That's awesome. Thank you. Shawn, how about you? Tell us a little about your journey.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So for as long as I can remember, I've just always been interested in technology. Anything that was mainly engineering related just always caught my interest. And so for a long time, I've wanted to like I've just kind of been like, I want to work in this kind of stuff. But I didn't really know like what that route was. And growing up, I grew up in a single parent household, and that was also low income. And so a lot of the different resources that I had just did not allow for me to go into that space immediately as a kid. And even throughout elementary school, most of middle school and high school, the resources were still pretty low, but the opportunities were kind of starting to increase. But I remember my school actually starting a kind of like an engineering like base curriculum and starting to introduce that to the student population. And I just thought like, oh my gosh, like I have to do that. And so from that point, that just kind of led me on this path of really learning about what different engineering types there were and what kinds that I wanted to go and focus on originally. And so I went to college or I'm still in college. I went to college and started out wanting to work on rockets and work as a rocket engineer at like NASA or SpaceX or Boeing. And that was really the main thing that I wanted to do for quite a while. But throughout my time in college, I realized I was like, I really love this area, but I really want to create something that directly affects people like right as I make it. And so that led me to become more interested in actually biorobotics and the area of, yeah. And
That's
so,
so cool.
right. And so just robotics in general that directly help people for whatever needs that they may have. So biorobotics that mimic the human body that can help assist people that need it, or even robots that can be made to do human functions and go and help in like say disaster areas where people can't normally go. And so through that, I became really involved with AISES, as we mentioned earlier, and that's been a huge organization that's just definitely helped build a community around my interests in engineering, and is actually where I met Danielle about the STEAM connection. Was at a conference for AISES, and I think before that I had known that there was a disparity in education for minorities in particular in STEAM or STEM, but I didn't realize how bad until her explaining to me like the different just really how the gap that there is in resources and knowledge and accessibility. And I mean, from that point and a lot of other things, you know, of course, with all the things that have happened this year are really kind of bringing out information about the reality of how big the gap is in not only just racial issues in general, but in the STEAM community. And so with that, that really inspired me to go and just really help Danielle in the STEAM connection and really help with that connection of bringing more underrepresented students into STEAM and really just kind of uplifting this community that is so behind and so just it's in such a position that needs help like right now. And the pandemic, as we've seen, has even more so just kind of made that apparent. So that's what I'm doing now. That's what I'm helping with, and I'm excited to hopefully start graduate school in a couple years in biorobotics. So that'll be a cool experience. Stay tuned.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. And that's a great transition too to my next question, which is really starting to get more into what the STEAM connection is and why it is. So I'd love to hear from y'all's perspective, maybe starting with Danielle, a little bit more about your philosophy of STEAM education. And I think one of the interesting angles there that I'd love to hear about is what was your experience of the way that STEAM or STEM was being taught? And what were the main things that you wanted to change through STEAM Connection?
So I mentor 35 robotics teams right now. And I have mentored my teams for a very long time. And I've also started a bunch of teams. I love working with youth robotics teams. I think it's really cool. But in working with those teams, it opened up my eyes to a really big problem. And that problem was affordability. For example, the robots that in Michigan, at least, the elementary school teams were using were around $500, $600. And I was like, this is just not accessible for most of the communities that I'm working with, especially Indigenous communities. It's like for one robot, that's insane. And other issues on accessibility regarding access to Wi-Fi, which is not accessible for everyone, right? Also, accessibility to different resources for children with learning disabilities. So a common theme around the problems that I was seeing was around accessibility and then also diversity. I was noticing that in STEAM, whenever I Googled STEAM coloring sheet, all I got were coloring sheets of old white men in science and engineering. And
true.
And it was just so, it bummed me out because I was like, I want my students to see people who look like themselves doing amazing things in STEAM. And so a combination of those goals drove me to start the STEAM Connection. And I started with children's books and also with robots because I'm very much into robots. Our whole team, we love robots so, so much. And I also want to be a biorobotics engineer. Less in the helpful realm and more in the frivolous, let's make goat robots and stingray robot realm. But, you know.
That society needs.
Yeah. So those combining factors contributed to me wanting to start my educational nonprofit run by students where we create educational resources that I think kids need to access because I feel like the STEAM realm is so filled with people just wanting and seeing it as a money-making opportunity. And I don't think it should be that way. I think that so many kids are getting left behind and that increasingly skills and everything from like coding to electrical engineering, kids are going to need to know that. And the kids who are left behind out of those camps and those classes and the learning opportunities, they're going to be far behind in not only school, but also in their careers. And it's like, well, what can I do to solve that? And my idea was mostly robotics.
Well, so that's awesome. And it makes me think a little bit about the way in which you approach these problems. I love that this is a student-run initiative. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you made that choice? Why you decided now is the time to start, and B, what unique values do you think having an organization like this be run by students brings to the community?
So when I graduated from high school in 2018, I was still working with my senior robotics team. And I noticed that a lot of the community programs that I was starting, I started around 20 my senior year, like a after school tutoring program in STEM specifically, some other robotics programs, a parent newsletter, a bunch of cool things that I was really excited about. But I noticed that a lot of the times people are trying to tear me down for that. Like, oh my gosh, this is such a horrible idea. And then later you see the idea on their resume as their own. And you're like, oh, okay, it's time to move on.
Sounds like you're ready for academia.
Oh my God. And I was like, you know what? It's time for me to move on. It's like, do I still want to continue these initiatives? Yes, they are so important to me. And so it was just about creating my own space where I could get funding for it, support for it. And starting out as a student-led organization, that's because everyone I was doing the work with were students. And so most of my friends were all around my age. And we were like, well, we can teach classes, mentor students. We can do everything that you want to do and want to do to help people. And I was like, okay, this is doable. This is really, really cool. And as time has gone on, I see how well young students connect with other young students. Mm-hmm. And I see how there's a power to change a student's mentality about pursuing a STEAM career. or the mentality about studying, or their mentality about one day pursuing something, and everything from robotics to, it's just, I think, a really amazing opportunity. So I think that students connect really well with young kids. And I've seen that even in myself. The kids love that they're taller than me. And they connect with me on that point. And they're like, how old are you? 12? I'm like, that's rude.
Look what I
laughing.
made.
Sean's laughing because he is so tall. When we took a picture together at AISES, I was shocked. I'm like, do I really look like that to people?
But it's true. Sometimes it's things like that that with. Go ahead, Shawn.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say I'm 6'4", so everybody that I interact with is like, oh my gosh, like what? Like it's so a normal response, but yeah.
I'm 5 feet. So it's a little rough.
So Shawn, for you, when we talk about philosophy of education, philosophy of STEAM and STEM education specifically, what was your story? How did you look? What did STEM and STEAM look like to you that you wanted to change, and what drove you to want to do that through STEAM Connection?
Right. So the main thing, which I kind of touched on earlier, was the disparity of accessibility around a lot of the underrepresented groups, not only just in STEAM education, but I mean education in general. Like the 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 the, the lack of resources that is just so apparent around not only I'll pick one right now, the Indigenous community. And for me personally, being a Navajo or Diné person, and that tribal member, that tribal community is just, it touches very close to my heart. And the lack of resources and just the widespread poverty that's across that entire nation is just so insane, because for a long time growing up, I thought, we're the best country in the United States is the best country in the world, and we have no, like, everybody's doing good here. If you live here, you're doing good. And that's just not true at all. And it's so crazy how things that we take for granted, like running water, like just turning on the faucet and getting water and flipping a switch and getting electricity, a large portion of the Navajo community don't have that. They don't have running water. They don't have electricity. They don't have heating and cooling for when it gets extremely hot or extremely cold outside. And that just, with that in itself, brings on all kinds of challenges. But when you try to throw education into the middle of it, it's like not even on the table. Like, we're the point of view of somebody who just does not have those resources is just like, I'm trying to survive. What's the point of, putting all this money into learning about education or doing education? And one thing that has just really encouraged me throughout, I would say, my entire life is really my mom, who's 100% like from the Navajo Nation, and she's seen all of this, and is just really pushed my sisters and I to just be like, education is the most important thing that you can work towards, because of what she's seen and what different things are apparent and still today. And so that's been the main thing that's been driving me. And I think what the STEAM Connection has, that's so special compared to other organizations, is that that's its main goal, is to help out those people who can't help themselves right now in an accessibility standpoint, and just in going into STEAM areas. And so being a person in STEAM, like, it's just even more so that I'm interested in helping other students. But just that focus of like, we are trying to help people who can't help themselves right now, and that's the main goal.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, it makes me think about the way that the world is being increasingly shaped by STEM and STEAM, and how important it is that we be conscientious and intentional and thoughtful about making sure that, if that's true, if STEAM is a force that's shaping society, that the people shaping STEAM be representative of society. And so I love the way that y'all are talking about this and your focus on inclusivity, accessibility, affordability. And I'm curious, why do you think that hasn't happened yet? What do you think are the major barriers? Why hasn't this goal been achieved to date? And let's start with Shawn this time.
There we go. I'm gonna say the big thing. I'm just gonna go out on a limb here. The entire society that has been the modern society that's been created so far has been because of European colonizers across the world, and the systems that they have set up in not only just their time, but the time for we have systems in place that are hundreds of years old, and they were designed to be set up to last hundreds of years. And that has been the main focus, I think the main driver of people becoming involved in STEAM in general. And so the society that has been created and built today was because of the people who have been given the privilege to do those things and set up these systems for themselves, and not only for themselves, but for everybody in general. And I will say that a big part of it too is just money. It's very, it's very money oriented. How can we get money? How can we get it fast? Where can we get it from? And I think just that as a whole has really built um, the society that we see today. And it's in everything. I mean, it's in almost everything, and little things to things you would never think of. And so, one example is with the Apple Face ID and facial recognition in general. That was built by majority of white male engineers, and designing it, creating it, and shipping it out to the world, that team of people did not, I would say, had less consideration for the people that they weren't. And so a lot of the issues that were brought up with the Face ID was that people of color, mainly Black people, could not be recognized by their Face ID because it couldn't recognize the facial features that were distinctive to them. And so just little things like that, that are just kind of have been ingrained in a lot of the different things that we see today, I would say is the main contributor to all of that.
That's a great point, and that's a great example of the ways that algorithmic bias and the things that we create are a reflection of the biases held by the creators themselves. Thank you for sharing that. Danielle, anything you want to add?
I totally agree with what Shawn said. And not only that, but the systems are still being upheld right now. One main thing that I've noticed is through the hostility that exists in the STEM/STEAM community, especially being an engineering student in both electrical and mechanical. I notice how hostile people are, and how right away they just assume you don't know anything, that you're not meant to be in the places that you are. And that goes for women and people of color, especially. And it's like you can't exist in a space without people questioning why you're there. And that can be really difficult, because I see that happen not only with my students, I see that happen in my experiences, I see that happen in my friends' experiences, I see it happen with so many of the people on the STEAM Connection team. And we exist in our different careers because we love what we're doing. And people often just don't want to see you there. I get messages and DMs all the time of people saying like, oh my gosh, you're, a girl, you're not supposed to be doing this. You're not meant to be in STEAM. And that can be really discouraging. I've even had like stalking issues because of it.
Wow.
And it's just absolutely insane to me that this is still a problem. But the fact is that people don't want to see people being successful in their same industry a lot of the time, especially when it's been traditionally a boys' club, a white boys' club, and they often want to keep on upholding that. And because you don't get called out, if it's all just of the same people, you don't get called out for the different biases that you have. You don't get called out for your lack of diversity on your team or your lack of diverse thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a huge problem, because when people come in and they're like, hey, this is the problem, they're like, I don't see it. And I see that happening in most engineering circles. it can be really hard to walk into a conference and know that you're going to be followed, you know, that people are going to treat you weirdly, you know, people aren't going to respect you, you know, people are going to stare at you, people are going to photograph you. And it's really difficult to kind of like contend with sometimes. It's like, whoa. And it also, you know, that when you work with, like, I have a lot of female mentees. I know that when I work with them and I bring them into these circles, it's my job to protect them as well and to make sure that these environments are safer for them. Another reason I think that STEAM is so inaccessible right now is because of how trendy it is. And because if you look on Amazon, all the products and everything, people see it as a money-making opportunity. STEAM books, they're expensive. STEAM robots, they're expensive. Every single STEAM educational product really is pretty unaffordable. There's 3D printers are overall pretty expensive. If you want to do like a STEAM kit, often you need everything from like a soldering iron, you need solder, you need a well-ventilated area, you need to know how to do it, you need a 3D printer for often a lot of kits. Things, just the accessibility issues are pervasive in so many different ways. And so I think that trendiness is very harmful. And while it's beautiful to see STEAM and everything from like TV shows to represented in many different ways, it brings up an issue of driving costs up, and many kids are getting left behind because of that.
That is such an interesting point. I haven't heard it put that way. It's sort of, it's not that, it's almost like you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not necessarily the popularity or the trendiness, it's the commercialization that comes with that. Yeah. And the shift in the incentives that comes with that. Right. That's really interesting. And, you know, I think it's actually a great segue to talking a little bit more about STEAM Connection itself and the types of resources that y'all are creating, the types of programs that you're producing. So can you sort of walk us through what are the main offerings and what are the types of resources that potentially educators watching this could access for their students?
So let me grab my bucket of robots.
Yes.
Well, I'm spilling robots everywhere. So the main thing that we created at the STEAM Connection that we're known for is Every Kid Gets a Robot. And it's a robot that I invented that costs less than $20 to make, and we send it to kids for free. Now, thousands and thousands of kids, which is insane. I actually, when I met Shawn, he was stacking my robots up on one of our tables. So I have a photo of just all the robots, like accordion style. So this is Every Kid Gets a Robot, or ECHR, and it's a 3D printed robot. It runs on an ESP32 development board for all you fun techie people. And it has little hexagon designs in it, or benzenes, because one of the teams I mentor and I'm alumni from is Benzene Bots. And this is what a chassis looks like. We fit a little 9-volt battery in there, connectors, board, and I designed it in a 3D modeling software called SolidWorks. And I love SolidWorks. It is a great resource. I teach with it all the time. Shawn and I just wrote an article for them and their blog. This is a stainless steel one that's 3D printed. It's so cool to me that you can 3D print stainless steel. And then this is thermoplastic right here. But the robots have been to more places than I have been, which is insane. I'm like, oh, we've traveled so far. This one is one of my favorites because I hot glued dinosaurs onto it. I spent $50 at the toy store.
It doesn't get better than that.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I have more toys now than I did as a kid. I work with kids all the time, and I love to just put them everywhere. Like if you look closely, you'll find little sparkly geckos in the back, or little robots and different things. So Every Kid Gets a Robot is the main resource that we have at the STEAM Connection. I've also written 6 books that I self-published, activity book, and then 5 STEAM books. Which I give out to kids for free, usually through PDF, because I'm not a big fan of using paper. Also, we teach classes. In the month of January, we taught 20 classes, which was really cool. And we provide a lot of digital resources, our Make a Robot platform, where kids can download the resources to make robots themselves. The robots run on we program it beforehand, so the robots can run even without access to Wi-Fi, which is awesome for so many communities. Like you can still get a robot to work. And a new resource that we just came out with and are continually coming out with until Christmas is a robot that I've been working on named 20. And because I just turned 20 a few weeks ago. And it's a robot that costs a little over $20 to make. And kids can download the resources. on our platform online, and new things come out every single week. In fact, after this, I'm releasing some more stuff to be able to make your own fun little robot that looks kind of like a crab, which I love, but
Nice.
robots all the way. And kids can make it with cereal box, 3D printer. They can decorate it. There's an LED matrix as an eye. I just think it's so, so cool. And it was about time to come out with a new robot.
That's awesome. And that's going to be available on your site at the
Yes,
STEAM Connection site?
Yep. Currently, we have the bill of materials that has been released, and we also are releasing the electrical diagrams today. I'm about to go finish testing everything after our conversation.
Oh, so hot off the presses. This is hot off the news.
Yes, very much so. Always.
So tell me, y'all, a little bit about why robots, both for you personally, but then also why do you think robots are a great vehicle for engaging students, and in particular students who are members of groups that have been historically and currently marginalized in STEM or underrepresented in STEM? Why do you think robots are a great vehicle for change? Shawn, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, I love robots. I think they're so cool. The fact that you can take something that's inanimate and make it do stuff is so crazy to me. And so that's the main thing that's gotten me interested in robotics, is just like the so many different applications that you can make a robot do, and the different things that it can mimic, and just all kinds of stuff. But and I think that interest in particular that I see in myself, I think as a parent and a lot of students, and a lot of younger people that are wanting to become more interested in STEAM. And so I feel like robotics is a really good tool to help kind of bridge that, like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And what is that about? How do I learn about that? How do I do that? And that really gets translated through robotics, because there's so many different things that can be learned by learning how to make a robot. And so it's just, it's such a perfect thing. And I think a big thing too is that I think one thing that helps is I would say like media, like TV shows and movies and such. Like everybody loves robots. Everybody hypes them up. Everybody, when you see a robot, it's super cool. And so I think that just widens the scope of who can be interested in robots, and just really get that point across of like, yes, this is cool. Now, like, there's so many different things you can learn from this cool thing, and all the different stuff that comes with it. So.
Oh, that's such a good answer. Danielle, what about you?
I teach educators all the time, especially in like lectures, presentations, things like that. And one of the things I get asked the most is how to get kids interested in STEAM careers. And I say 3 things. 1, robots. 2, anything you can destroy. And 3, anything to do with cardboard.
Anything you can destroy.
Yes, it's very true. Anything that moves, anything that they can decorate, bend around, like cardboard. And I think that robots are a very unique vehicle. That's fun. But I think they're really cool because you can teach electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and computer science in a project-based way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're able to finish that robot, you know that you've met different learning goals. So you were able to either program the robot or upload your own code. You're able to often design your own wheel. A lot of the kids do. So interacting with the computer-aided design software, you're able to follow instructions to follow a robot. So it helps in many ways with preventing developmental delays. It helps often parents and kids work together to be able to design the robot and build the robot, which I think is a really unique and special thing that I don't see a lot of the times in education. And it also does it all combined in a very affordable way, and in a way that the kids are able to learn no matter what grade they're in. So we have different lesson plans and things depending on which group of kids are interacting with it, which I think is super exciting. And I think that robots are just the perfect way of being able to teach skills that may be overlooked. And I think it's a really cool and also super cute way of doing it too.
It is super cute. I mean, anything that you can glue dinosaurs on.
I know.
So zooming out a little bit and thinking, you brought up you work with educators a lot, thinking about the educator perspective, if you're watching this and you are in a computer science or some sort of tech part of STEM or STEAM classroom, what advice would y'all have for teachers? Like, what can they do in their classrooms to make it more accessible, to make it more affordable, to make it more inclusive? Of course, they can go ahead and reach out to STEAM Connection and use some of those resources. But beyond that, thinking of it at sort of zooming out a little bit more, what kind of advice would you give those educators? Shawn, yeah.
I would say Google is your best friend. um, because I can't even like touch on how many different projects there are out there, but just starting with like looking up, I mean, simply like cheap, cost effective, like STEM project ideas. Like it's as easy as that. And a lot of the different things that you have like usually around a classroom can be utilized to help teach different things in STEAM in particular. And so, I mean, a really good one that I'll give everybody a freebie right now. If you get a strip of paper, or cardstock or something, and probably about like I don't know, like a foot long, or just cut a strip, maybe like an inch or two of a piece of paper, and roll it together and tape it, and then you have a paper airplane. And so and you can look up like the different like the physics behind it and why that works, but just a simple paper tube, and you can just throw it, and it's a paper airplane that just glides across the
I'm gonna
room.
have to try this.
It's
Oh, me
really
too. I'm excited.
it's really
I've never
cool.
heard of that.
Yeah, it's super easy. It's just a paper tube, and it's not like super long. It's just like an inch or two wide, but just taping it, and then you can toss it across the room. And the principles that go into that and how that works, just dive into the STEAM area, and particularly aeronautics and the physics of just aerospace in general. And so just little things like that. It's like one thing I try to tell people is that like literally all you have is all you need, because there are so many things that you have at your disposal already right now that you can use to help teach different ideas. And so for educators in particular, just look around. I mean, of course, collaborate with the people that you know already,
Like
and
us.
just right, exactly,
Now
like
go on.
us, reach out. And so just the people that you know, the people that you teach, the people that you interact with every day, just use what you already have. It doesn't take anything huge, big, or elaborate. It's something that just starts small and is really has an intentionality behind it that goes so much farther than like just an hour lesson of a day. So
I love that. It's such a great counterpoint to Danielle, to what you were saying earlier about this sort of commercialization trendiness of STEM and STEAM. And it's saying, well, yeah, okay, that would exist. Yeah, but you already have it at your disposal. Use what you've got. I love that advice. Danielle, how about you?
Yeah, a couple tips that I have. I have many because I'm always trying to teach in an affordable and an accessible way. One of my suggestions is that if you don't have access to a lot of different supplies or tech materials, but you do have access to things like tablets or computers, is to rely heavily on the use of software in your teaching, because there's a lot of free software that you can use. One of my favorite resources is the SolidWorks app for kids, which is a computer-aided design software. You can even 3D print the kids' designs from the software, or you can 3D print, or you can print your own paper cube. So you can have the design from different perspectives. You can print it out on a piece of paper, cut it out, and make a cube with it so that the kids can see what their design looks like. And that is a really accessible way of teaching like 3D printing, teaching CAD, and doing it in a way that you don't need to have a 3D printer for. Another thing is a 3D printing pen. Those are like $20. You can teach how to make different shapes and stuff like that in a very accessible way. And it's super fun to teach about materials like ABS and PLA. Another thing that I suggest is basic little bots where you get like a breadboard, you get a 9-volt battery, you get some DC motors, and you get some wheels and something to make for a chassis, so the body of the robot. Throw all those things together along with a battery clip for your 9-volt battery, and you can make a robot that continuously spins. So you have that current running through it, and it continuously spins, and you can make it go different directions depending on how you move the positive and negative wires in your breadboard. And that's one of my favorite activities to teach, because it teaches kids about circuits, electricity, movement, different things like that. And it costs usually around like $5-8. So I love that. It's super fun. Everything is on Amazon too, which is even better. And this is another project I like.
Just have it right here.
Yeah, this is my toilet paper tube robot that I started at the beginning of the pandemic to teach my students about not panic over buying things, and kind of just saying, hey, let's conserve what we have and support our communities. This is made out of 3 toilet paper tubes. Same thing, some basic electrical that's in Ecker, some DC motors, some basic little wheels off Amazon. I 3D printed a robot for the front of it with a top hat. And I combined all those things together, and the robot goes really fast. It can go in big circles, it can go straight, it can go back. And I found that was a really fun project too. And it only cost a couple of dollars. So I love that as well. The most expensive thing was the motor controller, which is $4.46.
That's great. Yeah, no, I love that. You can probably add to your list of like the best ways to engage robots, anything that you can break, and anything that spins extremely fast indefinitely.
Oh, yeah.
Probably add to that list.
Oh, and one other thing, if you go to your local like thrift shop, there's a lot of electronics that they're usually selling for like $3-4. And as long as you don't have any electricity running through it, you can give the kids some safety glasses. You can get a pack off Amazon, and some screwdrivers. You can get a pack of those as well, and you can have them just go at it. And I use that as an activity for them to often label the different electronics components they find. There's also cars you can get at, I think, Walmart, Target, little like turbo trucks, and I think they're around $10. And you can have the kids disassemble it and then put it back together. And that's really cool as well. And it has a lot of parts to it.
Yeah, I love the idea of having them sort of do almost a robot or electronic dissection.
Yes,
Thrift store. It's very similar to
That's how I got my beginnings.
That's awesome. That's a great tip. So my last question is the same question we always end with, which is to ask each of you. So Danielle, we'll do you first to get a list of 3 things. The first is, what's one thing that educators watching can either read or listen to or watch after this that you would recommend? The second is, what's one thing that you think that they should start doing immediately in their classrooms or communities? And 3, what is one thing you think they should reflect on? So let's start first. What's one thing you think they should read, watch, or listen to? Danielle.
So I recently started a podcast called Hands-On Techie Talks with my 13-year-old mentee, Vinia. Shawn's actually been on the podcast. And it's meant for kids, and it's geared towards introducing kids to environmental innovation. So different ways that you can innovate in your own communities to help the environment, but in many different ways, from biology to electrical engineering. And I think that's a really cool resource, because we also have hands-on worksheets that go with each episode. And we're going on to our 11th week of episodes. We post every single Tuesday, and it's super fun. I especially love doing it with Vinia. It's crazy that she's 13. You would never know, but it's amazing. So I recommend listening to that. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify. It's on many different platforms. So for sure, check that out. And we're doing a giveaway soon. So yeah.
Love the giveaways. And one thing that they could start doing immediately.
That's a difficult one. I would say research the communities that you work with and make sure that you have understanding of where your different biases and gaps are. So Harvard actually created a racial bias test, as well as like a disability bias test, a religion bias test that you can take right now, and it only takes a few minutes, and it helps you understand if you have an automatic preference for one race over another, and you can begin to determine, okay, why do I have this bias? What can I do to begin to dismantle this, because it's not helpful? And when I first took it, I was really surprised, because I didn't have any automatic preference for able-bodied people versus disabled people, or any race over another. And I was surprised, because I grew up in a very like religious, strict community. I'm like, this unlearning that I've been working so hard on has been effective, or at least is beginning to be effective, because obviously it's a continuous learning process.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really good and helpful thing to know. So I recommend that.
The implicit attitudes test, Mazrin
Yes.
Benassi. Yeah, it's we actually had her at one of our shows. So plug for the plenary, our It's Only Human show. She was there signing her book and talking a little bit about those implicit biases that we all carry around.
It's very helpful to kind of understand where you're coming from. And if you see a negative idea or something come up, you can begin to think about, where did that come from? Because as soon as you identify where it comes from, you can better identify how to get rid of it if it's not a helpful thing.
Exactly. That's what we always say. It's not about trying to make it so that you're an unbiased person. That's not going to happen. It's about recognizing them so that you can navigate them effectively. Right. So last one, what's something, well, actually this kind of overlaps with that one, but what's something they could reflect on?
Well, of course, reflect on your biases, but also reflect on maybe different accessibility gaps that are pervasive for your community or maybe for your students that you may not even recognize. One of the big gaps I've noticed in many of the communities I work with is that kids are not comfortable asking questions because they're afraid of looking like silly. And something that I've done is I open up like a Google form and I allow kids to ask anonymous questions, no matter how ridiculous. And I've noticed that has really helped. I have every kid at the beginning of every class I teach ask one meaningful question by the end of the class. And I read their questions, no matter how ridiculous. I've been asked it's like, who's your favorite rapper? What's your favorite designer of clothing? How tall are you? What are your races? And I think all those questions are just so funny. And it really helps kind of let the kids feel more comfortable. So kind of understanding where you're coming from and what gaps there are and how you can solve them. I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think those are great answers. Thank you. Shawn, on to you. What's one thing that everybody can watch, read, or listen to?
Yeah, I would say definitely for what I'm going to give both watch and read. So it's kind of like they're the same thing, but you can find information on both of them. Watch, I would say find documentaries, or just I would say documentaries in general. Find documentaries that highlight the disparities of minorities in not only the STEAM area, but just in general. Listen to their stories. Listen to what experiences they have created into this just a different piece of whether it's, I guess this blends in watch and read. So books, TV shows, movies, mainly documentaries, because it's really kind of gets to the factual behind it, but really look for the different underrepresented minority stories and just take in the information and just what look for different ones and just take it in and just kind of take that with you, and not just like don't try to be like a library and like know everything, but it's to help empathize with that particular group and to understand where they're coming from and what their history is and why kind of this piece of art has been created up to this point. And so that's the main thing. Yeah.
And what about something that they can start doing immediately in their classrooms or communities?
So something you can do, like I said earlier, find Google is your best friend. Find a project. Find a project. Yeah. And so find a project that with stuff that you already have, and really try to like have like an info session, or it doesn't have to be like a weekly thing or like a monthly thing. Like it can just be one session, but find a time where you can well, of course, everything's virtual now. So find a time you can get people together virtually, and really try to share the ideas and the knowledge that you already have about STEAM and STEM, and to share it with your community. So that's one thing to do right now.
That's wonderful. And the last one, what's something that you think everyone watching should reflect on?
I'm going to say the big thing to reflect on is not only, and I say this for me too, is to just reflect on who you are and where you've come from. Because that's a huge, for me personally, I'm saying this because it's a big part of my story. Reflecting on who I am and where I've came from is a huge motivator to where I'm going. And the idea of not knowing who you are and where you come from, it's a very daunting and kind of scary thing because you're unsure of where you're going because of it. But learning, I would say, who you are personally and what your like, I'll say in my case, my family history. I've been learning about my mom's side of the family with the Dene Navajo people and where they came from, their history, their entire just culture, traditions, everything from the past. And then on my dad's side of the family, through our family tree and just a lot of the history behind African American culture and how that's been a part of our family and how we've gotten to this point. And I will say it's by no means a quick thing. I have been looking into this stuff for, I would say, almost 3 to 4 years, and I still have like barely scratched the surface on like how much information there is. And so if you don't get it right away, if you don't if you don't get it right away, if you don't feel like it's like you're, getting the information that you need, like, it's okay. It takes time. Learning who you are and where you come from is part of a lifetime journey that I think is just part of life. And it's just a really great part because you get to learn about how history has played out into how you have gotten to the point that you are right now.
I love that. That's a beautiful note to end on. And it reminds me of sort of the heart of the I Am a Scientist program, in that, that being advice that we give to educators, know who you are first. It's really powerful because it goes into this idea that, humanizing the teachers, humanizing the scientists, humanizing the people who are sort of shepherding the next generation into STEAM, into STEM, into any area, starts with you knowing yourself and knowing what your access points are, what your connection points are, so that other students can see themselves in you and in those stories. And so I think that's a really beautiful note to end on. Thank you both so much for joining us. I know we have a couple of things in the works. So for anybody who wants to learn more from the STEAM Connection, definitely check out their website. Can y'all give us your social media handles and websites that you want to point people towards?
Yep, our website is www.steamconnection.org. We have access to so many different resources as well as our upcoming classes, so be sure to check that out. We also have our social media on there. My personal Instagram is @Danielle Boyer. My Twitter is @Danielle Boyer, but with an extra R on the end. And if you want to find me on LinkedIn, it's one more R after that.
Perfect. Shawn, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say just definitely check out the STEAM Connection. It's got a lot of our different links that we have on there. My Instagram is just Shawn_Ray1. I have a Twitter, but I don't really use it, so I don't really share it that much. And so the main thing is Instagram for me, and just the STEAM Connection. And those are kind of like the main bridges to connecting with us. So.
Wonderful. And so for anybody watching that wants to learn a little bit more, we are going to be doing a giveaway soon with some of Danielle's artworks. So keep an eye on your inboxes. We'll be sharing this recording as well as an overview and more information about that giveaway. We also will be working with the STEAM Connection to be creating some more of our Spark Kits. So that's something to look forward to. So if you want to share more about Danielle and Shawn's stories with your students, keep an eye out so that we can share those through the Spark Kits coming in 2021. So thank you all so much for joining. Yes, we're so excited about it. And so thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Danielle and Shawn. And we will be back next month with some more conversations about inclusive STEM education. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.